Story 1. I work for a large company. I have recently been assigned to two knowledge transfer projects, one to Bangalore and one to Singapore. All contractors based in the United States were let go. Many, but not all, were Indian. I do not know their visa statuses. Our focus is to move the work as soon as possible. Singapore will pick up whatever Bangalore cannot handle. Bangalore is the preferred site because of lower costs. This transition is already underway. Story 2. What job market? Anyone looking for a job can tell you that one barely exists in the United States. Story 3. H-1B visa fees were usually less than $5,000 before this order, and many employers already refused to sponsor those visas. Now the cost has increased 20-fold. It will devastate international labor mobility. This almost resolves the white-collar employment issue in the United States, except that outsourced labor is not the tax component. Imported labor is. Offshore labor is not more expensive, but bringing that labor and its productivity to the United States is now massively more costly. Brilliant move. Story 4. This is going to severely harm healthcare. Medical students from other countries often train in the United States. They typically train on J-1 exchange visitor visas or H-1B temporary work visas, usually sponsored by their training program. Fewer programs sponsor H-1B visas because they are more expensive and time-consuming. The J-1 exchange visitor visa allows training but requires returning home after training, whereas the H-1B temporary work visa lets physicians remain and work in the United States. There is a pathway that can allow some J-1 residents to stay, but it is uncertain how likely that is. I once knew a colleague who tried and failed. Hospitals that receive Medicare funding, which pay residents $50,000 to $70,000 per year, are unlikely to sponsor residents who would cost around $100,000. So we will probably see more J-1 visas than before. That means many residency positions will go to physicians who will return home afterward. We will lose many foreign-trained and potential doctors. The American Medical Association estimates that 25% of doctors are international medical graduates. Those physicians are often exceptionally smart and motivated and compete successfully for positions over American graduates. They train in hospitals and locations where many Americans do not want to train, including inner-city hospitals and rural counties that voted for former President Trump. I expect this change will disproportionately affect healthcare in those areas. J-1 exchange visitor visa holders generally must return to their home country for 2 years before they can apply to remain. They can apply for waivers, for example by accepting a job in a designated underserved area in an underserved medical specialty, but obtaining a waiver may be difficult and time-consuming. Story 5. Big companies will start building overseas offices, taking growth away from the United States. True, Trump four-dimensional chess. Story 6. They will use the money to fund programs that subsidize companies' hiring and on-the-job training for Americans, reducing unemployment and making it easier for domestic companies to succeed. Just kidding, the money is going directly into the orange kleptocrat's pocket. Story 7. Trump just greenlit every large company to outsource those jobs instead of hiring locally. Instead of bringing H-1B visa holders to the United States, where they would support the economy by living in the United States, buying groceries, sending their children to school, and paying taxes, companies will hire outsourcing firms in Brazil, China, India, and elsewhere, paying 1/10 to 1/4 of the previous salary for those positions. None of that money will flow to the United States, and entire sectors will wither. In the same way manufacturing declined in the United States, no one comes to the United States for tool and die work because the experts are in Europe or Asia. Silicon Valley could be a page in a history textbook within a decade. There will be new technology centers in Canada, Germany, and Ireland. Mark my words. If this is not reversed quickly, within 2 decades the United States will no longer be a global power. Story 8. What about our hospitals? I have not seen anyone discuss this. Medical residency programs and shortages of doctors depend on international visas. Our medical industry will be severely harmed. Story 9. The United States employment level fell by 6 figures in 3 months. The next report could exceed that number. In the long term, the uncertainty and loss of faith will hurt far more. Story 10. With the added $100,000 per person, Companies will use that as justification to accelerate the creation of new office centers in India, which has been happening for years. More capital will be allocated to those centers, so most of these jobs will remain in India. I do not think this will create many new jobs in the United States, especially for lower-level or junior engineering roles. However, temporarily this will probably boost demand for mid-level talent. Story 11. I support this in theory, but the Trump administration would use it to grift people out of more money. For example, give us $1 million and we will waive your H-1B visa fees. The H-1B visa system was not being used as intended. It was supposed to bring workers for jobs Americans did not have the skills to fill. Instead, it became a way to obtain cheaper labor. Incoming workers' visas were tied to their employer. No job, no visa. In other words, if you were laid off, you were also deported. I witnessed many H-1B visa holders working far more hours than they should have because if they did not, they would be sent back to their home country. Story 12. Question for everyone. With the H-1B visa largely eliminated, do you think the administration will now target outsourcing to India by imposing higher taxes on companies that outsource to certain countries? Story 13. I am a manager in a multinational company. People who think this will be better for American applicants are wrong. If the cost increases by $100,000, companies will simply hire in other countries. Story 14. Not much, because the same executive order allows waivers at any time without explanation. In reality, a company could obtain a waiver through improper influence, and the issue would disappear, benefiting a public official at everyone else's expense. Story 15. Do not forget the caveat they built in. The administration can waive the fee completely if it chooses. You could bribe him for anything under $99,999, or flatter him enough to pay nothing. Story 16. Too late to matter. An entire decade of American information technology graduates were denied careers. At Chase Bank in Ohio, one department no longer primarily uses English. Exploited, frightened young people have put billions of dollars into the pockets of bank leadership and owners of Indian consulting firms. Companies use work visas as leverage to extract more than 100 hours of work per week, plus round-the-clock, year-round on-call duty, without additional pay. It is basically slave labor. Story 17. When will Trump start paying the United States for those more than 140 foreign workers at Mar-a-Lago? Story 18. Companies will just move jobs overseas instead of hiring locally. Story 19. It will allow more skilled people from China, India, and other countries to remain and contribute. More work will be outsourced. Large companies will be able to afford the fee to some extent, but they may offset it by lowering wages. It may create marginal new opportunities for Americans, but it is more likely that those positions will be eliminated. We do not yet know what the exemptions will be. Story 20. As far as I know, many doctors are on H-1B visas, so expect a collapse of our healthcare industry as hospitals already struggling either pay a large premium to retain their skilled doctors or face many vacancies, making it harder to schedule appointments and lengthening emergency room wait times. Story 21. I work in engineering. There is a serious shortage of engineers right now, and it will only get worse. Story 22. Reddit blames foreigners for rising housing prices and calls for banning foreign home ownership. Why is it different when it comes to jobs? Why are foreigners allowed to work our jobs but not buy our houses? Story 23. I am opposed to the H-1B visa, but I do not trust Trump to handle this properly. He will grant exceptions to people or companies who bribe him. Story 24. A salary of $100,000 for an H-1B visa essentially means small companies are out. Startups will not bother. They will hire remote workers in Canada or India. Big technology companies can pay, but they will create more teams in Toronto, Dublin, Singapore, and so on. The pipeline of graduate students dries up as well. If you are a talented student from abroad, why risk $100,000 just to maybe work in the United States? You would go somewhere more welcoming. In the long term, that means less talent in the United States, slower innovation, and eventually weaker growth and a weaker dollar. The United States essentially shoots itself in the foot while the rest of the world recruits the talent. Story 25. Did Melania reportedly come to the United States on an H-1B specialty occupation visa and then bring her parents to the country? Story 26. H-1B visa holders are truly Schrodinger's immigrants. They are simultaneously some of the smartest people in the world and cheap, exploited labor paid pennies on the dollar. Raising the cost of H-1B visas puts pressure on corporate giants and gives Americans bargaining power. If Generation Z and Generation Alpha play this right, they will be able to demand livable wages again. Don't fuck this up. Story 27. It will not. It just means technology companies, which are the largest sponsors of H-1B visas, will not be able to use low-cost Indian labor, which constitutes the largest national cohort of visa recipients, and will have to pay United States workers market rates. H-1B visas are a tiny segment of the overall labor force. Story 28. Maybe they will start hiring people in the country instead of outsourcing everything. Story 29. All the unemployed lazy idiots will finally be able to get a six-figure job at Meta and Google. No more unemployment in the Rust Belt, and the economy will boom like never before. Story 30. This also blocks hiring of exchange students who came here for undergraduate, master's, or doctor of philosophy programs. We would hate to be able to hire additional intelligent people and maybe keep them around for their lifetime. This dictator needs a nursing home. Story 31. It is unclear how large an impact this will have. There is conflicting information about whether this will affect the F1 student visa to H-1B work visa pipeline. If the pipeline is left unchanged, this will largely have no effect. If it changes, it will significantly affect a small group of people. It will mainly benefit new graduates in technology joining the workforce next year, as they will not have to compete with applicants for H-1B work visas. Some jobs may move overseas, but many return to in-person work because they believe on-site work is more effective. However, it is important to understand that the effect will be limited to the junior-level job market because current H-1B work visa holders have been confirmed not to be affected by the changes. Story 32. It could actually give American workers a fairer shot. If fewer companies rely on the H-1B visa, they might invest more in training and hiring locally. Story 33. H-1B visa holders constitute less than 1% of the job market. That is a drop in the bucket and amounts to vilifying legal immigrants because they are a soft target who cannot speak up. While some reforms are necessary, policymakers are throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Story 34. I want to know whether he is allowed to raise the price of anything simply because he wants to, without Congress signing off on it. Story 35. The focus should be on offshoring. The H-1B visa program is not the main problem. Is the H-1B visa program abused? Yes. Companies use H-1B visas to depress technology salaries by claiming a shortage that does not exist. They avoid paying American doctorate holders what they are worth. They train employees from India on H-1B visas and then send them back to India to assist with offshoring. H-1B visa holders are treated like indentured servants. I have known many H-1B visa holders and like them. Although the program is abused, the real issue is offshoring jobs, and this change is likely to accelerate that trend. Story 36. Donald Trump did something. How will it affect the United States economy? The answer is that it will hurt people who are not in the top 0.1%. Story 37. Companies have been planning this for many years. Now the push to add visa fees will only accelerate jobs moving offshore. Maybe Americans will work in sales or finance, not in technology anymore. Story 38. Companies can no longer get away with paying engineers who are worth $200,000 only $40,000 while threatening not to sponsor them next year. Story 39. H-1B visa holders are already subject to exploitation. They are paid much less than United States citizens in similar roles because their pay is still higher than what they would earn in India, and the sponsoring company has control over them. Increasing employer costs will not stop H-1B visa holders. Story 40. Just go to any university and check the ratio of American citizens versus non-American citizens enrolled in the Doctor of Philosophy program. Until recently, many of those graduates had the opportunity to remain in the United States and help United States companies grow. Now that seems difficult. Story 41. Everyone only mentions tech companies, but those who will be hit hardest are the students. Many school districts across the country have a shortage of teachers, so they hire foreign teachers to make up the difference. For many of these teachers, the pay is still far better than what they could earn in their home country, even if it is low by American standards. Story 42. Do you think the Make America Great Again marchers would go to school now to learn skills for these jobs? Story 43. He effectively killed H-1B visas. It's like making a carrot cost $20. No one would be interested even if he did not outright outlaw them. Story 44. It's another boneheaded policy that they will have to claw back as soon as they realize what they have done. Trump is the poster child for people who think the world's problems all have simple solutions and that everyone has been waiting for a clown like him to implement them. What centuries of the best and brightest minds could not solve, he thinks he will do with executive orders and proclamations. Then, just like the recent firing of government employees, a year from now he will find an excuse to drop the visa fee. He will not have the courage to admit they were wrong. Instead, they will blame it on whatever name they are using for Democrats now. Story 45. I am on the fence about this. The H-1B visa program was widely abused, which pushed many United States citizens out of good jobs. There are skilled domestic workers. We need to invest more in domestic workers before hiring from abroad. The question is, will Microsoft, Apple, Meta, and other large technology companies be exempt from this price increase? They were among the largest abusers of the program. Story 46. Sorry, I cannot assist with content that uses abusive language or targets people based on nationality. Here is a respectful, neutral rewrite suitable for text-to-speech. Concerns about the H-1B visa program. Critics argue it can displace American workers and contribute to lower wages for some positions. Supporters say it helps employers fill specialized roles and promotes innovation. A respectful, evidence-based discussion is recommended. Story 47. It won't affect anything right now. It would begin in 2026 with new H-1B visas. These fees are illegal. Changes to fees must be passed by Congress. The Supreme Court should cancel these fees before anyone has to pay them. Story 48. My husband is an immigrant physician. He was sponsored to come to the United States on an H-1B visa to work in an underserved area 25 years ago. He was the only specialist within a 100-mile radius, serving a retirement community. Today, he is a United States citizen and continues to serve patients in a new community. We will miss this. No community hospitals or clinics can afford these new fees. Story 49. It will stop the practice of industries firing American workers and replacing them with cheaper H-1B visa holders, resulting in more tech jobs for Americans. Story 50. It will force companies to hire locally, thereby lowering the unemployment rate. Story 51. In a long line of poor Trump moves, this one is good. It existed to harm United States domestic labor. We do not have a shortage of skilled labor in the country. This system exists to bring primarily Indian workers to the United States for much lower wages than the prevailing wage. Story 52. People use those to obtain cheaper labor. Now it is $100,000 plus the salary. They have basically eliminated work visas. Story 53. I think it may add another wedge between the White House and certain tech billionaires who have stated many times that such visas are crucial to their depth and pace of research and delivery. The demographic referred to as P25 is starting to flex its muscle a lot, and the Silicon Valley demographic may be seeing that their usefulness is starting to wane. Interesting times. Story 54. Companies are going to bow to Trump and give gifts in exchange for exemptions. Story 55. As with any change, the rich will get richer and the regular person will take it in the shorts. Story 56. Does that mean the company must pay fees to the government and a salary to the employee? How will this affect salaries of newly hired employees? Business owners will hardly pay both willingly. Will immigrants have to work a year for free until the employer has recouped the money? There may be opportunities, but I suspect the money spent will be recovered from employees one way or another. Story 57. People are rushing to build artificial intelligence robots. afraid that foreigners will take their jobs. Story 58. It will hurt technology innovation. Companies will struggle to hire specialized talent. Some jobs may move overseas and consumers could see higher prices. In short, we are shooting ourselves in the foot. Story 59. All existing H-1B visas are exempt. This applies only to new H-1B visas. Companies will move work offshore for even less money rather than onshoring. Story 60. Companies build offices and facilities in other countries and keep a minimal management staff onshore. It is not hard for them to do, and this makes much more sense now that the fees are so high. Story 61. Generally speaking, lowering immigration in this way does two things. First, in sectors where the H-1B temporary work visa is prevalent, such as engineering, accounting, information technology, and healthcare, wages will rise and unemployment will fall. Second, in sectors where the H-1B temporary work visa is not prevalent, which is most sectors, wage growth will slow, prices of goods and services affected by the first group will increase and real wages may decline, and unemployment will rise. The first effect is significant but narrow, while the second is less dramatic but so widespread that it typically produces a net negative effect on the country's overall welfare. This is similar to how tariffs on specific goods or countries operate. A tariff on foreign cars, for example, might protect the domestic auto industry and its workers, but it raises prices for the rest of the country and can leave most people worse off. Story 62. It amazes me how many people in the comments hate Americans and want us to give our jobs away to immigrants who will accept much lower wages. H-1B temporary work visas are capitalism at its finest. Companies can pay their employees less because immigrants will accept pennies on the dollar. If you complain about chief executive officers earning far more than the people doing the actual work, for example engineers, then you should not oppose raising the H-1B visa fee. Story 63. There will soon be no economy left. The job market has already gone. Buckle up, you all. Story 64. Is it actually going to happen, though? Doesn't it have to be voted on by Congress or something? Sorry, I'm not from the United States. Story 65. It's going to destroy the education sector. Nobody will grant an H-1B visa for a junior position fresh out of college. People pursue education to improve themselves and to work and live there. You do not get the most skilled minds from foreign countries. You get raw talent who become skilled by learning and working with the best and then contributing. With such uncertainty, there will be a large decline in enrollment of foreign students. Story 66. On the show 90 Day Fiancé, is this the visa they get? Asking for my wife and me because I enjoy the brain-dead drama. Story 67. This effectively prevents smaller companies from sponsoring visas. Only large technology companies can afford $100,000 or more per worker now. Story 68. This will continue to separate the massive companies from the rest, as they can absorb the fees and attract top talent. Story 69. It will make no difference whatsoever. The H-1B visa program is a minuscule part of the job economy. In technology, $100,000 is nothing to pay for a highly skilled individual. Companies already pay about the same amount in legal fees for these candidates. Story 70. There are many unemployed United States tech workers. This will make hiring them cheaper than hiring foreign workers. Story 71. To combat misinformation about H-1B visas, consult the official United States Citizenship and Immigration Services guidance on H-1B visa application processes and requirements. Story 72. You complain about everything. None of you have ever paid a fee. It is hilarious to watch people complain on Reddit once in a while. Story 73. What do you think? These rhetorical questions are pointless and produce the same answers. Trump is harming the country as a whole, discussing individual topics just for karma farming waters down the community. We all know we are in a dire situation in many ways, so focusing on a single issue feels redundant. Story 74. We made it harder to import skilled workers but easier to export jobs. Story 75. To be honest, raising H-1B visa fees feels like a short-term move to appear as if the country is protecting jobs. But in reality, it makes it harder for United States companies to bring in the skilled workers they need. Big tech and startups rely on H-1B visas for engineers, so higher costs lead to slower hiring or moving jobs overseas. Although it may be politically popular in the short term, in the long run it could subtly harm innovation and make the United States less competitive. Story 76. I do not know, but India's stock market is taking a massive dump right now. I am not saying whether that is good or bad, but it certainly is. Story 77. Well, he said that if an American company wants to hire someone from out of the country, it would have to pay $1 million. If companies do this, they will raise prices to offset the expense, again increasing costs for the middle class. Fortunately, few people want to come here, and most of the world thinks we are either a joke or dangerous. Story 78. For my company, we need people in similar time zones, so we are hiring many people in Canada. Story 79. Highly skilled 300,000 plus engineers will be paid. Everything else is outsourced to Asia. There are fewer jobs, higher prices, and lower operating costs. Stocks surge and your wallet shrinks. Story 80. Organizations such as the University of California, San Francisco, Southern California Edison International Business Machines, and the Walt Disney Company that held mass layoffs and forced workers to train their H-1B replacements as a condition of receiving severance will start hiring Americans again. Organizations that actually needed talent they could not find in the United States will simply pay the cost. Story 81. I expect a new wave of outsourcing for companies that can. Many others, such as organizations doing scientific work, will be severely limited in what they can do and who they can hire. Story 82. It is a grift. The fee can be waived at Donald Trump's discretion. Funnel enough money into his pocket, and you can hire whoever you want. Story 83. This employment is not supposed to crowd out American workers. If we bring some H-1B visa holders to the United States as technology workers or doctors, they fill highly productive and hard-to-find roles. For every 10,000 people, a few such specialists create demand for other jobs: medical receptionists, vehicle maintenance technicians, and construction workers for housing. We can grow the economic pie together. In addition, H-1B visa fees help fund Pell Grants and should support increasing domestic participation in these fields. Story 84. Based on my experience thus far, companies will not change. They will continue their hiring practices and simply pass these fees on to their customers. Story 85. Given the actual number of H-1B visas in the United States and the ability to issue exceptions, it will not affect the economy or the job market. It is merely a distraction. Story 86. Their country clubs are going to be very upset and understaffed. Story 87. It will not. This whole thing is for show and to pacify supporters of Make America Great Again. There will be so many exceptions and loopholes that anyone who pays the fee was not paying attention. There is already talk that the fee can be waived at the government's discretion. Story 88. I expect two likely outcomes. One, short term. Because of an exception process, I expect large companies to take that route, basically pay to play. Another grift from Donald. Small companies will probably shift offshore or possibly consider hiring locally. Given smaller companies are more cost-constrained, this will likely mean more offshore work. Also, because of the shift offshore, there will be less United States tax revenue collected on wages. 2. Long-term. I expect large companies to establish office buildings in countries where it is cheaper to hire information technology workers. This will lead to information technology work shifting to other countries, possibly to 90 to 100%, just like manufacturing is today. Story 89. For the near term, many companies that rely on overseas workers will not hire until they either find a workaround or can justify the higher cost of local workers and any resulting change in quality. Companies that anticipated this have made arrangements to avoid being impacted, so they may still not hire locally. Companies will follow the money, as expected. Story 90. Another point I haven't seen mentioned is that this only applies to new applicants, not to renewals. This means large technology companies that already employ H-1B visa holders can keep their workers while preventing smaller startups from competing. Story 91. It will not. First, it only affects new applicants. Anyone who already has an H-1B visa will not pay the new fees. Second, This will create a new concession for wealthy technology companies such as Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google to donate money to obtain exceptions to a $100,000 fee. Third, companies that rely heavily on H-1B visa holders will offshore the workload and use more telepresence technology. Fourth, the United States job market will not change because these are not entry-level positions. At the old fee of $15,000, employers would not use it to import someone to work at a call center or on a quality assurance team. That is what is throttling the American job market. Students graduating, even with a computer science degree, still lack entry-level job opportunities and therefore cannot gain the experience needed to qualify for higher roles. I started in the technology industry more than 30 years ago. If I had to take the job I first held now, I would have to emigrate to Bangalore or Mexico. Like the socialists, the Make America Great Again movement has accurately diagnosed the problem but offers the most ill-conceived and counterproductive solution imaginable. Story 92. The smart money is on Latin America to absorb some of these roles. Story 93. Either you pay a tithe to Pumpkin Joffrey, or you receive no visas. It is very simple. Story 94. With an increased rate for the H-1B visa comes a doubling of human immunodeficiency virus cases. Story 95. I am in the information technology staffing field and manage statements of work for Fortune 50 companies. This is not an issue. The fee applies only if the worker is outside the United States. Optional practical training participants, current H-1B visa holders, and H-4 employment authorization document holders are exempt from the fee. It is intended to prevent companies such as Tata Consultancy Services and Infosys from exploiting the system. Story 96. Costs will understandably increase. Software engineers have been complaining about H-1B visa abuse for many years. It is good that it is finally being addressed. Story 97. Some jobs will return to Americans, but I suspect most will be offshored. Story 98. I cannot speak to the economy or job market, but it is already having a terrible impact on the mental health of the international students I work with. Story 99. The United States urgently needs increased immigration. India has a wide range of skilled people. If the United States restricts their arrival, the economy could suffer soon. Story 100. I feel that many H-1B visa holders will move back to their home countries and work from there. Overall, their home countries will benefit from their income. Story 101. Trump will get rich. People will pay $1 million to attend one of his dinners, where he will agree to put them on the exclusion list. Story 102. Haha, all analysis is useless. The main problem is that some managers are insecure. Some colleagues, including those on temporary visas, may use emotional expressions to influence decisions and sometimes send important work emails at night or on weekends instead of during regular hours. Managers in positions of power sometimes undermine each other and prefer to build their own teams. Story 103. Companies usually pay the same or less to a firm such as Tata Consultancy Services or Cognizant for an H-1B visa worker. Those firms then pay the workers much less. Story 104. People on H-1B visas are intelligent. I think blocking them from entering the country is not a good idea. Story 105. I have 2 visa-sponsored physical therapists and expect I will not be able to hire any more. There are not enough Americans to fill this need, so Grandpa's hip is just going to stay stiff. I love the baby boomers celebrating like it is not going to drastically affect them. Story 106. This is a good policy. Currently, the United States Congress allocates 85,000 H-1B temporary work visas, while more than 300,000 people apply for them. The government selects recipients by random lottery. Many information technology outsourcing firms enter multiple applicants into the lottery to ensure they can move an information technology consultant to Ohio or elsewhere to replace a worker. Meanwhile, a high-technology company hopes that its one highly skilled, irreplaceable worker wins the lottery. In my line of work, most people are immigrants and annual total compensation varies from $500,000 to $10 million per year. We would happily pay $100,000 to avoid the uncertainty of the lottery process. A better system would be a Dutch auction. Story 107. There are so many caveats that it will not change anything. Actually, raising it would seriously help the unemployment crisis in the information technology sector in the United States. Story 108. I'd say Americans will get the jobs that most companies have been giving to foreign workers for pennies on the dollar. Story 109. I am pretty happy about it for my industry. Now do the same for J-1 exchange visitor visas. Story 110. It will stop job hopping by visa holders and eventually reduce the supply of workers, probably leading to higher incomes for everyone. Story 111. Many Indians on H-1B visas are being laid off at Microsoft, and the jobs are returning to United States citizens. That may benefit the United States but harms Indian software engineers. Story 112. It will cause wages to rise for Americans because they are not competing with overseas workers taking the positions for $5 an hour. Story 113. He raised the price dramatically for saturated job markets such as information technology and only for very high-paying positions. Prices for essential professions, such as doctors, remain the same. It is an attempt to balance the domestic job market and encourage the import of international labor in needed sectors. Will it actually have an effect? I would like to wait and see. Story 114. All on-site technology workers will be replaced by offshore teams, so United States companies will save more money. Story 115. It will help get jobs for all those unemployed new graduate computer science majors who were replaced by workers on H-1B visas. That absolutely has to be good for the economy. Story 116. Companies are not going to bring people in but will outsource the job. If anyone thinks companies are going to hire within the United States, they do not understand capitalism. Story 117. How will this affect companies? Employers will need to hire and invest in local students. Instead of hiring 4 senior developers from abroad, they will hire 1 senior, 2 mid-level, and 3 junior developers. This will force senior developers to mentor mid-level and junior developers while also performing their regular duties. Also, the majority of developers are not on H-1B visas. Developers work under other visa types. Therefore, the overall effect will be positive. Story 118. If they were truly invaluable, you would pay the fee for them. If you are not willing to do that, then maybe they were not irreplaceable to begin with. Story 119. The United States economy will skyrocket because unemployment will decrease. The Indian market is a lost cause, with no recovery expected for another 2 to 3 years. As information technology companies, they will have to lay off half their staff. Story 120. A friend of mine just got a job and cannot afford to pay the fee, so he is thinking about letting it go. It makes H-1B visa holders more miserable. Large technology companies will not care much, but smaller companies and outsourcing firms will. It may push a few more jobs to American workers, but in fields where there are not enough skilled people, companies will simply move the work overseas. The bigger long-term issue is that it sends the message that the United States is less welcoming to talent, which makes countries like Canada look more attractive. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.